Good morning. Today is Tuesday, December 6th. It's 8 o'clock, a little after 8 o'clock. We're starting a little bit, a few minutes late this morning, waiting for all of our board members to be present. But anyway, we welcome you. It's good to this past week to have received some moisture. Look forward to our snow report later on in our board meeting later this morning. We're starting earlier today because of the need to have a celebration this afternoon for lunch for the Division of Water Resources and the Board of Water Resources. So thank you, and we appreciate everyone being here. I'll just mention board members that are present: Norm Johnson, Charles Holmgren, Blaine Ipson, James Lemon, Wayne Anderson, Juliette Tennert, myself, Kyle Stevens. Acknowledge that Randy Crozier is excused today and is not here. And so with that, Candace, we'll turn some time to you to introduce the representatives from the division that are here.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. With us today, we have Shalane DeBernardi, Todd Stonley, Marisa Egbert, Tom Cox, Russell Hadley, Stephen Gregerson, Heidi King, and and Shannon's doing our minutes. And then AV, we have Paul Gedge and Carmen McDonald. And online, we have Ani Baynard. And while I've got the mic, if I might, Chair, just introduce Heidi King, one of our new water conservation coordinators.
Please do.
Heidi, do you want to come up to the microphone? I'm going to read your bio, and then you can say hi to the board and see if there's any questions or anything. So Heidi King, like I said, is our newest water conservation coordinator. She grew up in Logan, Utah, where she earned a BS in plant science from Utah State University. Since then, she worked for various programmatic roles in the public sector for organizations like Weber Basin and Thanksgiving Point. She recently graduated from the University of Utah with her master's in public administration to further her knowledge of government and nonprofit work. In addition to conservation, Heidi is passionate about all things nature and can be found exploring the outdoors when not at work. She's excited to join the water conservation team as a program coordinator and further conservation efforts in Utah. So we welcome Heidi. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say. Great.
Any questions of the board? Well, welcome, Heidi. Look forward to having you involved with the division. You know, great opportunities, great organization to work for.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Heidi. And then just one other element to note, Chair and members of the board. You guys all know Ani Baynard. She's worked for us for a lot of years. This last summer, she's worked in the River Basin planning section, and this last summer she helped us with all of the secondary metering applications and everything, and she liked it so much that she made a switch to join our project funding section. So welcome to Ani for joining a new part of our team, just so you guys are aware.
Thank you, Ani. I look forward to working with you. You're online, right?
I am.
She was, yeah. I look forward to working with you in your new capacity there and appreciate the work you've done up to this point. So thank you.
I'm very excited to begin, and I'll see you in a little while.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I mentioned it was good to be able to receive a little bit of moisture, and we look forward to the report later this morning. Just on a personal note, I live in an area where we did receive, in Kaysville, received some snow, and in anticipation of the snow coming, I went out and got my snowblower out, getting it ready, and lo and behold, would not start. Would not work, so I had to take it into the small engine repair place. So I had the opportunity to shovel these first two snowstorms instead of having the benefit of the snowblower. So what's a snowblower? Yeah, well, for those of you down in southern Utah, and I was glad that I took my snowblower in when I did, because when I went to pick it up yesterday, there were probably 50 or 60 that the guy had stacked there.
Oh.
So apparently I'm not the only one that wasn't forward thinking and getting it out and preparing it ahead of time. So, well, anyway, I digress there. Let's go ahead with the agenda items. As mentioned, we have a snow report. Well, first of all, approval of the minutes. Are there any additions to either the briefing meeting or the board meeting minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I did find, I can't remember which set of minutes it was. My name was misspelled in one place, and I thought Shannon does that, just as I've said before, it's a test to see if we actually read the minutes.
Where's Waldo? Where's Charles?
But other than that, I thought the minutes looked great.
Okay, and I called one, made one comment to Shannon earlier too. We noted on the briefing meeting that Wayne Anderson was excused due to the death of his father. I just asked that that be included on the board meeting minutes as well. His name was left off on that one, and so we'll transfer that over onto the board meeting minutes also. Okay, well, Charles, thank you for reading through all of the minutes. Maybe everyone else did and just doesn't want to acknowledge it, so thank you. Okay. Well, we'll go right into the other agenda items. So the feasibility reports. First one is that we have Davis and Weber County's Canal Company. Tom, if you'd like to brief us on that one. That happens to be one in my area. I'll just mention that it's, as we've seen in the past, Davis and Weber County Canal Companies is actively pursuing upgrading their canal systems, and this is just more of the same, so.
Yep, all I can say is they're back. Board's committed about $60 million to Davis Weber for secondary and the canal improvement projects over the years. So they're back for about to enclose a 1,400-foot section of canal. Just as they come along and can track down some grant money, they reach out to the board to help with the local cost share. So they're looking at 1,400-foot section in Clearfield. The cost estimate is about $3.2 million. They have a $1.4 million Water Smart grant, so they're asking 47.8% of the project cost, up to $1,530,000 from the board, be authorized today. They probably won't start construction on this section until next fall, but they have their shareholders meeting in December, so they want to get it authorized so they can pass their resolutions and things before construction starts. So next fall sometime they'll be back for committal of funds and we can adjust costs. Hopefully they'll go down, but look into your crystal ball and see. We're proposing that the board authorize the 47.8% up to the $1,530,000 to be returned at 2.1% interest over 30 years with annual payments of about $69,300. The interest rate is based on kind of a mix of ag, M&I. Ag interest rate is 1%. M&I is, at this point, based on the index, is about 3.2 or 2%. So they have about half ag, half M&I water. So that 2.1% is just a mix of those two. So that's how we came up with that. So unless there's any questions from the board, that's it for the briefing meetings.
How does that compare, their interest rate compare to the other projects that they've had in the past? I know I'm putting you on the spot to ask that question, but just out of curiosity.
Well, they range from up to 3.6% down to 1% and even 0% when they had a small enough project they could come out of the revolving fund for one. So when I started work here 32 years ago, the M&I interest rate was 5%, and it's gone down to as low as 2%. But now since it's We're basing it on the index. It's back up to the 3.2%.
Okay. Thank you for that additional clarification. This happens to be in my area, so Blaine, would you be willing to make the motion for this when it comes time? Okay, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Just one quick question, and I guess I'm going to have the same question on all of these. Are there any surprises? They're aware of these terms. Are they good with these terms? Are there going to be any surprises?
They're aware of the terms, and they're not going to be asking for anything different as far as I know. So.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The next one then is RM004, Cedar Hills City, and this is Marisa.
Where's Cedar Hills?
Down in Utah County.
Oh.
It's east, up on the east bench. Wayne, I'm gonna let you take that one.
It's northeast of Alpine.
I don't orient
Northeast?
myself very much with that county, so. Yeah.
Okay.
And sorry, this is one of the secondary meters, and Shalane and I, just last night, it's like, wait a minute, do we have some maps? And because we didn't do maps in the August board meeting, it's just kind of carried over for some of these. So I apologize for that. We do have some maps for those for a couple of them that are not secondary meters, including it didn't get into the board report, but we do have it for the PowerPoint for Tom's and for Hodges for mine at the end. So this Cedar Hills City, when they applied for the secondary meter grant, they did apply for both the grant and a loan. And then at that time, but as we were preparing for the August board meeting, they said they didn't want to do the loan. So they then things started happening, and I think doing their finances realized that they did want to do the loan. So we didn't have to do another application. So Wayne, that's why you didn't see another application for that. So we just proceeded. So we've only authorized and committed funds for their grant. So this is just for authorization of the loan, not committal of funds, just authorization. So they've got to do the whole bonding process. And so it's 28.6% of the project cost. And on this one, you'll see we did actually do a feasibility report, because this is what we would have done had it been with the grant, a combined report with the grant. And so you can see the committed cost share, and then the grant amount does not change. So that's still $1.52 million. Their cost share goes down because we were able to do the loan portion. So the numbers are a little bit different, just because it was based on original numbers. As you see, it was 70% of the cost for the grant. So just some adjustments there. Nothing, it wouldn't be a surprise if it didn't surprise us. So, but we don't. I heard Russell saying behind, well, as far as we know. So we're not planning on any surprises. On any of them, but especially this, it's 1% interest, 15 years. So I don't know, Wayne, if you had anything, and someone will be here to represent them. They'll be someone will be online possibly, and someone will be here in person. So, yeah.
Surprise me without a surprise.
Okay. Well, thank you for those, and look forward to those projects moving forward to the next phase. So we'll now go to the next agenda item, which is the committal of funds. The first one is RM015, North Park Irrigation Company. And Ani, we'll ask you to go ahead and present that information. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
So North Park Irrigation Company had been authorized for a grant and a loan. And after working with an engineer and I guess discussing their situation, they decided to withdraw the loan. They don't want the loan, they just want the grant. And their costs, of course, after working with an engineer, went up by quite a bit, like 125,000. So we are asking to authorize and commit 70% of the total cost of 350,000. So 245,000 as a secondary meter grant without the loan.
So this will be authorization and committal.
Yes.
Actually, you've authorized, so you just
Oh.
need to commit.
Oh, okay. All right. We've already.
They don't, okay,
Okay.
since I'm new to this, I'm not sure. I wasn't sure if you had to reauthorize the new amount or just commit it. So
Okay. Sounds like we just need to commit it, and so that'll be the nature of the motion.
Yeah,
Pardon.
there, come to the mic. So if you'll look in your books, you'll notice there are actually two motions. So we are asking you to commit the grant and then withdraw the loan.
Right.
So
Okay.
two separate motions for one project.
Mr. Chairman, that would have been my only question, whether I could do it in one motion or divide it.
I would recommend separating them just so we're for sure got that grant committed, then move to withdraw.
I think I can do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, the next one is RM033, Mountain View Irrigation Company, again in Weber County, and Russell.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is for committal for Mountain View Irrigation Company. It's located up in far west in Plain City in Weber County, kind of up by North Ogden. To me, that's the most significant thing about this project because I've never been in either of those two towns. So, okay, this is to purchase and install 1,400 secondary meters. Cost has remained the same as was authorized. Total cost of $2,913,000. The board loan being $743,000. The grant $2,039,000. The applicant will provide $131,000. And terms haven't changed. Sponsor isn't requesting anything different. The board would commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $743,000, and the project would be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $53,600. It's staff's report. And I don't think they will be here. I've told them they do not have to be here.
Okay. So if they've been told they don't have to be there, they probably won't be here.
You never know.
Who would? Who would?
Oh, they might, I don't know. They've got the link, so maybe they will appear virtually, but
Okay.
I don't think they are, so.
Well, and I think anymore, Russell, as the state continues to grow and develop, it used to be that we could determine, well, this is Plain City, this is Marriott, this is, anymore, they just kind of run together, so.
Well, they both little towns, communities have golf courses, I noticed.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you again. This is in my area. Blaine, would you be prepared to make a motion on this one as well? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Russell. Next one then is RM073, Hurricane City. Am I pronouncing that right, Jim? Okay. Hurricane.
I lived in Florida. It's hurricane, but
Okay, and Marisa is going to introduce this one to us.
when I lived in Florida, I never thought to call it hurricane and see what everyone said down there. So anyway, as we evacuated. So this is just the committal of funds for the loan portion. They had their laundry list of things to do, especially for a bond, and they've completed those items, and we're closing here pretty soon. Stephen, They've opened bids, they're opening bids soon. Hurricane, sorry. Putting him on the spot. I mean, he only has like 30 of these bonds to, I don't know. But we're working really hard to do this around the time that they open bids and yet still be able to get this done for them. So no surprises that I am aware of. And so just, it's for 25% up to 703,000. This one for Hurricane. And nothing has changed. It's as authorized. I did let them know they don't have to be here, so I don't think they plan to attend.
Okay. Jim, that's in your area. You'll be prepared to make the motion on that one?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Marisa.
Say the name wrong, let me know.
Okay.
They're not here to correct you.
If he did that, they'll drive him out of town. They already did up there.
Well, they don't have the Google Meet link, so they can't talk back, but they could look at YouTube and watch and see what happens. It's your call, Jim.
Okay. Well, we'll move to the next one then, and that's also one that Marisa will present. It's RE 459 Hodges Irrigation Company, and
Yes.
it's for expansion of scope, so.
Yeah, we've been these are kind of fun because stuff's coming in under budget. Unfortunately, though, in this case, this is the one where they had canal failure twice. Once earlier in the year and then again in July, and they tried to fix and then again in July. So they put in about 600 feet of pipe through that area, and we'll have a kind of a map to see where those areas are. Then, because they put the pipe in, unintended consequences, probably, slow down the flow once they got the water back running, and so just upstream, the property just upstream started overtopping the canal banks there. So they're asking to be able to put some pipe in there, and the great thing is that property owner right next door is paying, it's almost a 50-50 that they're paying for that. And so we would just pay our portion, 85% of whatever the property owner next door's not. So it should cover the costs because they've already know their invoices and everything for the pipe that's already been installed. So they're really on top of this.
Okay, Charles, this is in your area.
Yes, and I just had a question for Marisa. I assume that this is overtopping and running perpendicular to the canal down onto this property. It's not running parallel to the canal and falling.
Don't know the angle exactly, but I would imagine so too. All I understood was overtopping. That's all so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's causing a concern for that property owner next door.
Okay.
Enough.
I've only been up there once. And
Yeah,
I
I
had a
didn't
hard
make it back
time
up.
finding it.
Yeah, it's across from the marina.
Yeah.
And so it with an assumption that it must be overtopping enough and causing enough problem not only in the canal but on the property next door that the neighbor next door, the property owner wants to pay is willing to pay half of the costs. So, and it's not cheap. Yeah. So
That's good. I
just wonder about the next property owner upstream from that.
I wish Commissioner Cox was going to be here today or online, and I always try to shame those Rich County guys into participating in cloud seeding, but it seems to have no effect.
Well, if they do that, then it might overtop the canal even more. And I just want to go back and note that when we were divvying up the projects, there wasn't any of the secondary meters, all the 70, there wasn't any real strategy per se. There was a couple strategies, like Russell and Tom got the crazy ones, especially Tom. But as I recall, Russell handpicked Mountain View. It may have been something to do with the name of the company, so We're excited for the area. So, and that is Russell. He gets to know the community. Love that. I don't know if you all noticed in the board meeting we had up at the Capitol that he got treats. So, jam or something? Yeah. Elderberry jam. He knows all about the festival. That's Russell. Gets to know the community.
Okay, well, that takes care of the projects that will be discussed at the board meeting. So we'll go to the next item, and that is Director's Report.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we will be covering a number of things. One, we definitely wanted to recognize some of our board members who are finishing up their third and second terms. So we'll announce that in the board meeting, but want to recognize Jim Lemon, who's finishing up his third term, and he's told me he's not going to put his name in the hat for another term. But we're really grateful for his service. And then Norm Johnson is finishing up his second term. And I understand that he doesn't necessarily want to put his name in the hat again. Blaine Ibsen is also finishing up his second term, but I think we were able to twist his arm to throw his hat in again. So hopefully we see him next year if everything goes okay, but just wanted to recognize the board members and their service. So thank you, gentlemen. In addition, I'll just cover a few of the highlights that I'm going to cover in the board meeting. We did have our first Growing Water Smart workshop this last month. And so this was an effort to bring key community staff and water planners and decision makers together to really kind of look within their individual communities. We had 5 participants: Weber County, Summit County, Sandy, Provo, and Layton. We plan to host we definitely have the funding to host at least one more, maybe 2, and we'll look to get in some of the other regions. But yeah, ended up being a really great event. And as you can imagine, water can be challenging sometimes when you're talking about all of the things regarding integrating land use and water planning. But overall, they were very successful. We did have the Bear River Commission meeting since we last met, so I'll have an update about that, kind of what was on the docket and what was covered. Be talking definitely about some of the Colorado River efforts that are going on. Next year will be the year of NEPA. There's a lot of different EISs going on that are all in a very tight time frame that we'll be working with the Bureau of Reclamation to go through those different processes. So we'll cover some of that. And then also, since we last met, the governor announced a proclamation closing the Great Salt Lake Basin to new water right appropriations. So this is something we can chat about here. I wanted to make sure we had space and time if you guys have any questions that you want to talk about here, but the suspension allows for the existing water rights and applications to be used and developed while promoting more efficient use of existing supplies. So my understanding is that it's really close to any new applications. There are some questions about how the state engineer will make her decisions based on this proclamation, but that being said, that's up to her. There were some limited exceptions for new applications, and this include proposed non-consumptive uses, applications that include a mitigation plan. So if they're kind of more of a change application, changing the water right to be something else to offset the depletion, and applications for small amounts of water associated with small domestic uses. So that is another element that is part of the exemptions. And some people have asked me, what's the Great Salt Lake Basin? It really includes the Bear River, the Weber River, and the Jordan and Provo. So they did exclude the West Desert, Tooele from this proclamation, but that is kind of what is going on there. So big thing. This has only happened one other time in the history of the state, is the governor closing a basin by proclamation, and that was in the Sevier River Basin in 1947, if I got my date correct. So all the other basins are closed, but it's through administrative procedures through the state engineer's office. But so this is pretty historic to have another proclamation closing a basin. Any questions or thoughts on that? I want to make sure to.
When you mentioned that it closes it to any new applications, how many current or existing applications are there out there? Any idea on that?
I don't have the exact number. I know that the state engineer that it said in the last, 3 to 4 years that there were a number of applications that were quite large that are on the books. There are also smaller ones up in Box Elder County. So there are definitely some existing applications that have not gone through the whole process.
And I'm assuming are those going to be approved, or are those put on hold with it being closed now? Even if a new application has not been acted on, what's its status? Probably not going to happen?
That is a great question that the state engineer is going to have to wrestle with, because one of the first things that the state engineer evaluates her decisions on is that there's water to appropriate.
Yeah.
And so if there's a proclamation that says there's no additional water for new applications, it will be a fun question that she'll have to wrestle with.
When I saw that, that was my very first question.
Yeah, yeah. My understanding is they think that they can act on the applications that are already in the queue. I just don't know how they'll make their decisions on that.
Candace and Blaine, just to give you a little bit of dangerous knowledge that I know.
I love danger.
It's like Bear River Water Conservancy District, when the previous state engineer opened it up to further development, we filed on 15,000 acre feet of additional water that has not been developed, but we have the filing on record. But we have filed to use some of that with well drilling, and we've had a difficult time with the regional engineer from time to time getting our well applications approved up there. So we've had to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get things accomplished. So it's a tough process up there.
Yeah.
What impact will it have on the Bear River Development project?
That is a great question. We have been meeting with the partners on that, with Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, Weaver Basin Water Conservancy District, Bear River Water Conservancy District, and Cache Water District, and our AG's office to ask that very question. One of the elements that is within the proclamation is that the state engineer will kind of report out or evaluate the status next November, and make any recommendations whether to proceed or to continue with the proclamation. If for some reason she made a decision to that there all of a sudden was water to appropriate after this kind of suspension, if things are looking better as far as water supply, it does have to go through a process that's legislatively laid out to call back the proclamation. It doesn't, just because she reports something doesn't mean that it happens. It has to go through this process. But yeah, it's definitely pretty historic that it happened.
Well, both exciting and challenging times.
Yes, and then just a couple other things that I'll mention during my director's report. We have kicked off the Great Salt Lake Integrated Water Assessment Plan, and we have also hired a project manager, and we'll introduce her to you next month. She comes from a sister division, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Her name's Laura Vernon. So she's been the Great Salt Lake coordinator, and we were able to sway her over to come over and help us with this Great Salt Lake Integrated Water Assessment. So looking forward to that. And then the GSL strike team, I'll give you guys a little bit of information of what that is and what they're doing. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I'll fill you in. And then also just this happened since we had our last board meeting, the governor's office of planning and budget and all of the people who helped with it finished the coordinated action plan. So we released the 4th chapter of healthy watersheds. So that was released. So that whole plan is done. And now we have to just do the fun part of planning, of doing all the actions within it, which there are a lot. So happy to send that out to you guys as well. So that will be what I'll be covering in my director's report.
Okay. Any other questions of Candace? Okay. Well, moving right along, are we going to be done early?
So we do have information to the board that is
Okay, that will,
it's the next agenda item if you.
go ahead.
Okay, so we already covered our first couple of announcements with some staffing changes. Next up is our status of funds. Shalane? Shalane, will you also cover kind of the secondary metering new application period and some of your highlights you wanted to share?
Yes, of course. I'm a little excited. I had to share some items with staff because I was so excited when I found them to share with you today. So let's start with the status of funds. And I feel like a broken record sometimes that I think many of us feel like secondary meters is kind of taken over and so very little's happening elsewhere. But as you can see, we did get the Hodges Irrigation Company contract done in the revolving fund. That's why they're coming back today to say, hey, now we've spent the money that we needed. Can we use what's left to do a little more? Nothing's happening in the City Water Loans Fund. It's status quo right now. So we welcome applications. The C&D fund, now we've seen a little bit happen because we've had a couple of closings for loans for the secondary meter projects. So you can see some of those maximum ones at the 3.6 million. So we've got almost 12 million contracted from the C&D fund. A lot more there committed, so they're in the works. Couple of those that are up today will be from the C&D fund as well. For you to consider, I will make a note. The next page is the small system secondary meter grants. And with all the ARPA funds, we really haven't done anything with those for a while. I will say that Maurice's being very creative, and we're trying to figure out, especially if we get some of these smaller applications for secondary meter grants, if there's a way we can give them some of it with this and some of it with the ARPA funds to make those go a little further, to not lose these funds that the legislature appropriated before they even gave us the ARPA. So we are going to.
Because it's at 50%.
Yeah, that's right. It's a 50% grant. That's all it can match. So if we can provide, I mean, this is, you may recall, you may not, there's been so many, I know, but Linden City actually came to you a little over a year ago, and they were the first to get a small system secondary grant before the ARPA funds were even available. So you provided 50% of their project costs, up to about 1.2 million. Then the ARPA funds became available, and they said, well, hey, we'd like 70% instead of 50. And so you also gave them ARPA grant funds to get them up to that 70% grant total. So we're trying to figure out if there's going to be a way to do that. So as the applications come in, and that's, I'll talk about in a few more minutes, about the third application period for secondary meters. We're going to try to work with that so we can maybe get some of these funds spent as well. Of course, there isn't, there is a time crunch on these as well, and this is one of the more difficult things, is while it doesn't have the ARPA fund date criteria, since it's specifically from the legislature, it's for a fiscal year. So people have to get it out the door pretty quick unless we can get authority to not have it lapse at the end of that fiscal year.
Okay, so that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
What is the status of the time frame for those for those funds.
Yeah, when we get them, so Linden's, we had for a fiscal year that ended in June 30th and got authority to not lapse until next June 30th. So Linden has until next June 30th to spend their small secondary grant, which is, yeah, why we're having fun. We're paying them out of both pots, but want to get those funds spent so we don't lose them.
So does this 2.7 million lapse
Right now, it's scheduled to lapse
At
June 30th.
June 30th of this year?
Yeah, of the coming, 2023. June 30th of 2023.
Okay.
That's when it's set to lapse. So we are going to request that we can have non-lapsing
Continue,
authority
yeah.
so that hopefully have another year to get them out the door. But yeah, these, it's weird when you're talking 250 million, 2 million a year seems small, which is kind of sad. But we are trying to figure out a way to use both.
Well, you can see the dilemma, people could, just like Linden, I mean, why not go for the 70%
Right.
as opposed to 50%?
Absolutely.
And so it seems like you might have a harder time.
Well, and I think if we have that option that we can offer both, 50% of one, and then bring you up to the 70 with the ARPA funds, then they can get their 70%, but we can also spend some of this money. The thing that makes it a little difficult is you have to do two separate contracts because they're two separate funds. So it's a fun in-house and working with the applicant to do, but I think we'll be able to do it, so.
Would there be any benefit in going to the legislature and asking them to change the ratio on this?
Might not be a bad idea. I don't know if they would, where these were before ARPA. I think they might be pretty set. Candace?
And yeah, I would just say that within HB 242, which is now 73-10-34, trying to get better at my statutes, guys. So thanks for dealing with me. One of the things that's interesting is they have a schedule to decrease the grant cost share as time goes on. So the first 2 years, it's at 70% because they're trying to get people to apply early. And then on year 3, it goes to 65, and then 60, and then down even below 50%. So
Right.
I think that is a possibility. If we could put it on the same kind of schedule, that may be a possibility to change that.
And maybe, see, I hadn't even remembered that, but you're right. The ARPA funds available are
Years down.
decreasing as every year. So maybe we don't want to bring it up because we don't want to drop below 50 on these if it's continuing beyond the 2026 that ARPA funds are available. So, but now's the fun one. Let's go to this ARPA secondary meter grants because we hit a milestone. I don't know if you noticed, we've got $100 million in grant contracts now. So of the 250, there is $100 million actually contracted. Now, of course, that's not spent yet, but you may remember as we've discussed this over and over, contracts have to be prepared by the end of 2024. We're well on our way. So we are starting to get funds out the door. We are working like crazy with people. We've got a lot of applicants who have said, yeah, we've got invoices, we're ready, we need our money. So we are continuing to work. And so while we're talking about that, I'll mention the third round of applications that Candace asked that I talked to you about. It is open right now. We opened it on November 28th, and it goes through January 6th. So we won't have to crunch during the holidays. Applicants might have to crunch during the holidays to get something in. But our plan is that once the applications come in, after January 6th, we'll do the same thing we did with the first and second rounds, review them. I believe we've already received 6 or 7 applications, so we've only been into it a week. But there was a lot more outreach this time. I don't know if any of you saw the news. There were a couple of news stories about this third application period, reminding people these funds are available. Please get your application in. And we went further this time. This time, we prepared a letter, we prepared emails, and we took advantage of the Rural Water Users Association to get this out to their contacts. We're taking advantage of Water Users Association to get this out to their contacts. We've actually had some outreach. Maurice's worked with Heidi, our new employee, to do phone calls. Do you provide secondary water? You should submit an application. And we also used the list of known contacts from Water Rights, and Jack, who you met in a prior meeting, also been working to get accurate contact information for secondary water providers. So we sent physical letters to everyone that we could. So we are really trying to get the word out that these funds are available, and this is probably your last chance to get them. I mean, we are asking the legislature for more to get some more meters done, but for the funding that's currently available, if you looked at that bottom of that sheet, there's just over $58 million in grant funds available. So we think this third round could take care of that. So on that note, are there any questions on the status of funds? I have one more thing I have to update you. Yeah, Kyle.
Just a comment. I noticed as they move from the committed category up to the contracted, you leave off the date.
Right. Do you want the date when they're contracted? I can.
I guess from my perspective, I would like to just see, what type of time frame, how much time it's taking to move from the committed up to the contracted.
Okay.
Right now, we don't have any idea.
No, and that's true. I'd been putting the date on primarily so you could see how long some things were languishing there.
Right, right.
But yeah, if you want to know the contracted dates, I can absolutely add those. Those aren't a problem at all.
That'd be my recommendation. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but.
Sure. And, yeah.
Can I just make a comment about that?
Sure.
And maybe you were about to. A lot of that is heavily dependent on the applicant.
I
They have
understand,
requirements, yeah. And we do have a few applicants that we were able to convince, hey, we know you're not sure what's going on with these secondary meters, please apply anyway. And so they did do that. They've already been authorized, but they are waiting around and possibly through the legislative session, this next legislative session, just to make sure where things are going to stand after the legislative session. So there's some of those that are just kind of holding on and waiting for a minute, especially when it comes to the loan portion. So there's going to be some of that in holding patterns.
That gets to a question that comes to mind. And we haven't seen the governor's budget yet, but if there's some indication that there's going to be additional money put towards secondary metering, and it doesn't have the same strings attached as the ARPA funds, being committed by 24 and spent 26 and all those types of things, what kind of a conundrum is that going to present?
Yeah, I don't know. I think our priority will be to get these funds out the door. At the very least, there's still the requirement that they have to be fully metered by 2030,
Right.
January 1st of 2030, so basically the end of 2029. So, while that seems a long time for some of these systems who have so many meters to install, I really don't think it'll affect it all that much. I think while some may wait to see what happens, I would guess that they'd rather be in line to make sure they have access to those funds So if the law's not going to change and the requirement's not going to go away, I think we'll still be getting plenty of applications to make sure they have access to free money. So if we're good to move on, there's one other thing I wanted to mention to you. Because part of this keeping the status of funds and tracking projects and everything, I noticed something and I thought, okay, I've got to tell the board. So one thing that happens at the end of every fiscal year, you know, we had a board meeting in May, I think, and then, or was there one in June? There was one in June. And then we had that massive one in August. But between May and August, or June and August, the fiscal year ends and all of a sudden status of funds starts over. So anything that gets contracted or bonds closed in June, you don't necessarily see. Because all of a sudden it's just gone from status of funds. And, you know, it's taken its money with it, but they've disappeared. So I don't think it was ever highlighted that two of your largest projects of this last fiscal year, the Uinta Water Conservancy District bond that was $23 million, I think, something like that, and the Provo River Water Users Association Deer Creek intake bond of $65 million, both closed in June. So that was a huge chunk of money right at the end of last fiscal year. So then I was working on an update. Our office prepares a document called Water for Utah that we give to the legislature every year, updating them on all the workings of our office. And I always provide updates on what the board has done over the last fiscal year. And then there's always this total of how many projects the board has funded and how much funds have been provided. And it was really fun when I took those into account, those large projects, even though, I mean, the big thing we've all been thinking about is secondary meters lately, but that all happened in August. So that wasn't last fiscal year. So as I updated it with the last fiscal year, I'm like, oh, we only did a few regular projects last year, only about 6. You know, some dam safety, but you got that Deer Creek intake and a large canal being put into a pipe, and we added it to what was already there, and it put the board's total funding in its 75 years at over $1 billion. So I looked at that and I went, wow, okay. You guys have been a part of that, providing, I mean, last year we said it was 980 something million that the board had provided over the years, but now you're up over $1 billion. So
You just answered the question I had. 'Cause I've been going through here trying to find the Pro River.
and it disappeared.
I can't see it anywhere.
Right.
Now I know why.
Now you know why. And I thought about that. I thought maybe next August, I need to add a page to the end to say those things that were contracted between your last board meeting and the new fiscal year, because otherwise, yeah, I realized they just disappeared.
Total picture.
Yeah. Yep. So I just thought those were a couple of highlights you might like to know, and kind of got me a little excited this week. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Shalene. Just a couple other items, and I might just note on the secondary meter applications that through this process, we are also accepting applications for those that have capped out, where we have kind of 2 different pots of money that we set up board rules for, and then the legislative 200 million. Granted, we will prioritize those that have never received funding through these grant applications. That's why there's been such a significant effort by Shalene and her folks to get the word out about this, but we are opening it up to those who may have already capped out as well. So just so you're aware of that.
And how long are you going to wait on those? Wait for the ones that haven't submitted an application to come in, and those that are requesting additional funds, what kind of time frame are they gonna have to wait on?
So we're really trying to put forward in this next application period that this is the time to, just because the timing for this money is so compressed that we have to have it contracted by 2024 and in the ground and installed by 2026, that we are really trying to get this funds committed and authorized, committed, and contracted so we can get this done. So we are opening up this round of applications to accept applications for those that have already reached their max.
So to clarify, Kyle, I think what we'll do is we're waiting until January 6th when the application period closes, and then we'll consider them all. And those who haven't received funding will get priority over those that have. So then if we have to adjust, if there isn't 10 million apiece, another 10 million for all of those that already have received funds, we'll have to adjust that. But we'll just consider them all at one time after January 6th.
And there are within the board rules as well as the legislative portion of it, some criteria for us to evaluate on. So we will look at that as well as we go through this process.
Right.
But we definitely will prioritize those that have not received any funding. Great, thank you. And then just one other element, we have had regular Lake Powell pipeline updates in the board meetings with kind of the status of the drought and climate change issues that we're facing on the Colorado River. Those are really obviously a high priority to the 7 basin states as well as the Bureau of Reclamation, and that has impacted the Lake Powell pipeline progress. So Washington County Water Conservancy District is focused on water conservation and reuse to get them through kind of this short-term time. And we're, just so you guys are aware, Lake Powell Pipeline is still part of their long-term plan. But during this time, with everything that is going on, they need additional supplies, and so they're looking heavily at water conservation and reuse. But yeah,
So they're focusing their attention there as opposed to,
yeah.
okay.
There's just so many issues on the river as far as the, water supply issues. And I mean, Lake Powell right now is at about 25%. Lake Mead is just slightly above that. And it's unfortunately not projected to have a great year next year. I'm super excited that the snowpack has started off so good. But there's just a lot of questions between what could happen between now and then, and just how low the reservoirs are.
Are you gonna be going down to the meeting in Vegas?
Yes, I will be at that meeting. And happy to report back in January. Oh, great. Good. Is anyone else going to CRUA, Colorado River Water Users Association? Okay, great. Yep, it's an annual meeting in Vegas, so we'll be talking about all things Colorado River. And that is the information to the board that we had for you today. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Candace? Any other items to discuss?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could we talk about the schedule for next year? Would now be an appropriate time? I know it's not as exciting as all the other things we were talking about. I was just going to, and we don't have to plan around me at all, but I was just going to note that I do have a conflict on January 26th.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. No, yeah, so I was just going to see if my colleagues are open to, and the staff are open to potentially changing that January 26th. It's definitely not, not a major thing for me, but given potential changes in leadership, it might be awkward to
Okay,
miss that one.
so that's a question for,
Let me check the AV calendar.
Okay.
That's the use of this
Gotcha.
space.
And it's not just the space, it's the AVT.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And so again, completely workable. If not, I just bringing it up while we're here.
are there any other dates, even though we voted on this earlier and set those
Yeah.
dates? Is there any other discussion that needs to take place relative to the schedule?
Good for you, Jim.
It looks like January 19th may be available. I'd want to double check with our AV folks, but generally on their calendar, it appears like that may be available.
And like I said, the only reason I ask is just because I'd be potentially chairing, depending on, I don't know. And I'm
Depending on
not
the
to
will of the
yeah, not to presume anything, and completely okay not. So that was the only awkwardness.
When does the legislative session start?
January 17th.
Okay.
And Paul just sent me a text that we are empowered to bump OGM.
OGM.
Maybe I shouldn't. Oh, okay.
Or even the afternoon.
It's a staff meeting, so I think potentially we can let us do some work, but just for planning's sake, what does January 19th look like for all of your schedules? Because if it doesn't work for you, then there's no sense in us trying to dig into it. So I'm seeing a couple head nods, so I will double check. Oh, does
I'm
it look okay?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll look at that maybe during the break and we'll confer.
Okay.
Great.
Just to ask, thank you.
We could even go to February 2nd. That's Groundhog Day.
Oh, gosh, that'd be good. That's a good day.
Okay. All right. Well, and since it's just been briefly mentioned, there will be a change in one of the, the last agenda item you'll notice in our board meeting will be the election of officers for 2023. And I would also just like to, at this point, thank those whose terms of service will end. And thank you for your service and participation, Norm and Jim. Valuable information and opportunities you've had to be involved with the board, and the rest of us at some future point in time will be looking to move in the same direction that you guys are. And if Blaine desires are to continue on, hopefully that will work out as well. So, okay. Are there any other items to bring up and discuss?
Well, other than the one other item I'd note is that this would be the last, board meeting for you chairing the board. Just want to thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Chair
It's been an honor and
Stevens.
a privilege for me to be able to be involved with the board. So thank you.
Harvest your gavel.
I'm interested to see what the outcome is of these meetings that Candace alluded to earlier about growing water. I'm interested to see how you grow water.
That's an interesting name.
That's an interesting, way to refer to it as, so. Okay, well, if there isn't anything else, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn until our board meeting at 10.
So moved.
Been moved and doesn't necessarily need a second, but since there is a second, we'll accept that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
And just so you